Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this MAPA webinar about Colombia. Thank you for joining us. My name is Yoav Elinevsky, and I'm the co-chair of the Latin America/Caribbean and Immigration Working Group of MAPA, and a member of the Latin America Solidarity Coalition of Western Massachusetts. We do work to end the deadly US sanction on Venezuela. We see the sanction as a tool of war and terror. We reject Madeleine Albright doctrine that it is okay to impose sanctions that kill tens of thousands of children in order to protect the human rights of those people that are being killed. We are also working on immigration rights, especially for immigrants from Central America, and we point the connection between the history of US policy in Central America and the crisis of refugees, people who are fleeing Central America and coming to the United States. It is interesting to note that there is only one country that its citizen does not run away and trying to get to the United States, and these are the Nicaraguans. There are very few Nicaraguan refugees, yet Nicaragua is the country which is most vilified by the US government and the Western media here. We do educational work about Latin America and US policy. We put forward the connections between overseas imperial policies and the internal policies of unmet human needs here at home. We mobilize the public to push our federal representatives to radically change US imperial policies in Latin America and the world. After more than 3 years of publicly pressuring Representative McGovern, in May this year, the congressman wrote a public letter to President Biden denouncing the blanket US sanctions against Venezuela and verifying what the majority of Venezuelans and progressive already know, that sanctions kill and they make life impossible for millions of ordinary people. This webinar is the second of 2 webinars about Colombia. The first webinar, the Colombian Strike, a historical and political conversation, provided an historical context for the rebellion in Colombia. We learned about the colonial and imperialist roots of the economic and political structures in Colombia. We were shocked to hear about the level of violence in Colombia. Hundreds of thousands of civilians killed since 1970. Tens of thousands of people were kidnapped and disappeared. This is occurring in the country which is the closest US ally in Latin America. This webinar has an action part as well. We have a petition calling on the US to stop military and police aid to Colombia. You and I have spent $10 billion on Colombia in military and police aid and training in the last 20 years. We demand that our government end this policy, close US military bases in Colombia, and stop organizing a regime change operation in Venezuela from Colombia. Today's webinar is titled The Colombian Strike Report and Analysis from the Ground with the Popular Movement. We are honored to have with us Teri Mattson from CODEPINK, who went recently to Colombia with an international human rights delegation, and Víctor de Currea-Lugo, who is a journalist, professor, and an activist from Bogota. Thank you so much, Teri and Victor, for taking the time to be with us. Teri and Victor will make each a presentation of 20 minutes, and then we will open the floor for questions. Please put your questions in the chat. Thank you, everybody. And now I'll give the microphone to Teri. So thank you, Teri, and go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's a real honor to be speaking with you this evening. And thank you, Yoav and Mass Peace Action, for the invitation to share my experience in Colombia. I also want to extend a huge thank you to Víctor de Currea-Lugo for joining us tonight. He's a dear friend, and you will hear some really very personal and very compelling account from him, as he is Colombian and talking with us tonight from Bogota. I had the honor of meeting him and working with him in May, early May, right after the paro had started, the 28th of April. So really happy to be here with all of you this evening. So let me, I guess the best thing for me to do is just start. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the delegation I was invited to be part of in May. And that was, the dates of that trip were May 25 to June 2nd. And I was invited with a group called Misión Internacional de Solidaridad y Observación de Derechos Humanos. So it's an international mission of solidarity and observation of human rights. It was focused, the trip was focused on studying the violation of the state violation of human rights under the context of the national paro that started on the 28th of April. So this delegation was organized in Buenos Aires, actually, and it was organized to go and look and investigate what was going on in Colombia, particularly given all the horrible human rights violation stories that were, presenting themselves in the media. Now the paro, and Victor is the perfect person to discuss this with you in more detail. The paro started on April 28th in response to the president's legislative proposal of raising what we here in the United States would call the value added tax, which would have affected the cost on almost all consumer necessities during a period of economic decline, and an economic decline that was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that was pretty much the match that lit a pile of kindling wood that had been building for about 52 years. And I think most of you probably learned about the internal civil war and the last Colombian segment that Mass Peace Action hosted. So specifically regarding the delegation that I participated on, I'm gonna share our delegation report in the chat. That has all the nitty gritty details of what we saw, documented, witnessed. It's not pretty, but it's a very compelling report and worth reviewing. For me personally this evening, I would like to share with you a few of the things on the trip that affected me the most strongly. And before I start talking about that experience, I really have to mention to you how intense each day was. And when we sun up to sundown, and many times sun up to sun up, taking testimony, documentation. We did the witnessing, as we call it, in various forms. Some was audio recording, some was video with audio. Most was no voice, no face, and we took copious notes to record the witnessing so as not to cause any additional threats to the people we were talking with. So these were particularly emotional experiences we had. We talked with some people who had given their testimony before and were a little more comfortable with doing this and a little more articulate in doing it. We also talked with some people who it was their very first time sharing their experience as to what they had suffered under the state repression. And sometimes those conversations lasted for many, many hours, and it was our responsibility as human rights observers to just simply listen and support them and encourage them to share their experience, because what they're suffering is so helpful to everyone in their country and others throughout the world as well. So I also have to give a huge thank you to the Argentines I was traveling with, because they were so incredibly professional and experienced at their work and were so supportive of everyone we met with, and also, quite frankly, very supportive of each other and me. So it was a profound experience on many levels. So this trip started on May 25. And we were originally a delegation of 22 people, 21 Argentines and myself representing the United States, CODEPINK specifically. Upon our arrival on the 25th, our trip leader was deported. And so ultimately we were a delegation of 21, again, 20 Argentines and myself. So this was a real learning experience for me on many, many levels. We spent our first 2 days in Bogota. We met with well over 20 different labor, social, feminist, gender, indigenous, and religious organizations. These different movements, organizations, platforms are called various things depending on where you're working in Latin America. So all of those different people, all those various meetings that they provided us with, gave us a significant amount of historical, cultural, and political context to the current situation we were going to witness in Colombia. And it also gave us an introduction to all the different demographic sectors that were being persecuted by the government, suppressed and oppressed by the government. So that was a very intense 2 days, but very, very important. So that allowed us on day 3 to break down into 5 smaller teams, and we were sent to various parts of the country. So this was one really great thing, having such a large delegation of 20. So we had a group stay in Bogota, and they were basically the command and control center for the delegation. They also did some witnessing while they were in Bogota, but principally they served as the command and control center for the delegation. And the rest of us from various points of the country, at the end of each day, all of the documentation that we had collected was uploaded to Bogota in the evening. The team in Bogota reviewed everything. They made sure that any photographs and videos that we took had the faces blanked out. And so people were not identifiable. If people had requested their voices to be altered, the team in Bogota did that as well. When they were finished with their work each night, all of the documentation was sent to Buenos Aires, and we have thousands and thousands of documents in Buenos Aires that are continuing to build our post-delegation report. So where did we go? We had a team in Bogota, we sent a team to Cali, we sent a team to Medellin, we sent a team to Popayán, and then we sent a team to Pereira, which is where I went. And there were 4 of us that went, and so went to Pereira. So each team spent 5 days in its respective city. We documented every person we met and every meeting we attended. And as I said earlier, the documentation was done via audio, sometimes video, most often by handwritten notes. The stories of it, and most of the stories were very, very similar, and it had nothing to, similar, everything from 16-year-old primera linea people to 80-year-old grandparents who witnessed violation of themselves and other family members. So the stories were principally of excessive and or arbitrary military violence. These were consistent throughout our visit, not just in Pereira, but throughout the country. And we especially heard of the repression and violence by what we know as the ESMAD teams, ESMAD, which in Spanish is Escuadrón Móvil Antidisturbios. English would be, I guess, a mobile anti-disturbance squadron. So I want to talk to you about the ESMAD teams. And let me see if I can get my screen sharing going here. Let me get rid of this. Give me just a minute, I'm sorry. Okay, can you all see that? Did I do it properly? Okay, so this is This is the full correct name of the delegation that I participated on. Again, it was organized out of Buenos Aires, 20 Argentines and me from the United States. And this is all of us. Wonderful group, and as I mentioned earlier, incredibly professional and experienced. As all of you can imagine, they're from Argentina. Every Argentine on the delegation had either personally experienced torture, imprisonment during their military dictatorship, and or had an experience with a family member. So these people were very in tune to the situation in Colombia. Here is, so this is one of the personal experiences I want to share with you. And again, please be sure to read the full delegation report for extensive witness testimonies. But this photo that I'm sharing with you right now is from 28 May, the 30-day anniversary of the National Paro. This is in Plaza Bolivar in Pereira. And it was a huge, peaceful, beautiful gathering. A lot of music, kind of like, I think maybe what those of us in the States would maybe call more of a fair. You know, there were a lot of pancartas or banners and music and a lot of conversation and media, and very peaceful, but continuing to grow throughout the afternoon. It got quite large actually, but very peaceful and very celebratory. Here is one of the many pancartas that people had painted and had on display. And of course, the Ecuadorian flag was everywhere. This banner says, the problem is the system, revolution, the only solution. And that was pretty much what we heard everywhere in varying forms. So this is just a sample of what we saw on May 28th. And as the event started to grow, it got too big. It was, as far as the state was concerned, there was no, what should I say, among the crowd, no violence. It was very peaceful. It was joyous. It was celebratory. And then it got to a certain size and an SMOD team showed up. And I want to share with you what that team did. So this is about a minute, I think. So let me share this with you.
Entonces, ¿qué estoy haciendo yo? ¿Están viendo o no? ¿Están viendo o no? ¿Cómo? Pues están viendo. Entonces, yo voy a quitar eso. ¿Qué? ¿Cómo lo hago?
So this went on, this looks initially like a basic, well, I guess what those of us who like myself who grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area during the Vietnam War, what would be a dispersion by tear gas of a crowd. This crowd was peaceful and celebratory. The tear gas continued to be shot at us for 45 minutes. Well after the crowd had started to disperse. The tear gas canisters just came and came and came for 45 minutes. It did not stop. This team approached Plaza Bolivar from 4 directions, from all 4 sides of the park. They penetrated the event from 3 sides. the stairs that you're looking at, and then to the left and to the right of you, and then behind us is what is known as a primera línea. And they tried to get through this fourth side of the park, but did not. This is a primera línea. These are the youth that many of you may be hearing about, that, you know, some as young as 15 years old, who are this first line of defense at events, but also in some locations throughout major cities as well. And in that case, and Victor can correct me on this, and believe they're Puerto Resistencias that they set up in cities. But this was the primera línea set up for this specific anniversary event. And the SMOD team tried to break through here as we were all exiting the plaza through this direction. So it got fairly aggressive. And again, the tear gas came for well over 45 minutes, even though everyone was already dispersing. So this was my first experience seeing a primera línea. And it made a really huge impact on me because I had heard about this before going on the trip. But these are young people who fight off or defend the protesters, marchers against these SMOD teams, and they use very rudimentary equipment. This is a drum barrel that has been cut into and created into a shield. And it's usually 2, sometimes 3 young people that will stand behind one of these and keep the police and SMOD teams at bay, while people like me who were participating in the event were, you know, evacuating the area. So very rudimentary, but they're very successful at what they do. And they also accept the fact that they could be mortally wounded. And these are young people. And so here is a young man that did a primera línea young man. He was gracious enough to let me share this with you this evening. He asked that I not show his face, obviously. He was, he's 17, and he was shot with one of these. And these are very common. They're marbles, basically. They're about the size of a marble. And that is the actual, what do you say, artillery that comes out of the weapons. And so he was shot, and he was not allowed to go to the hospital, or when he did go to the hospital, he was turned away, forced away by an SMOD team standing at the hospital entrance. So these wounded protesters cannot safely enter a hospital. And on one occasion, we had heard that some young people had actually gotten into a hospital lobby to receive help, and the SMOD team actually shot tear gas canisters into the hospital lobby. So these young people, when they're injured, they have now learned to stay away from the hospitals, and they are providing themselves their own medical care. And also there are medical, professionally trained medical people who are volunteering at events. And they are sometimes referred to as 2nd, 3rd, or 4th line defenders. And they are the ones that offer triage to the primera línea youth, and also to protesters who get injured. So this is all done by people like this particular woman. She's part of the Misión Médica. But also, this was quite surprising to me, a little shocking, but a very profound experience, particularly when I had a chance to talk to the young people involved in this particular photograph. This is a photograph that I like to call We Are Just Learning, because the young man with the white surgical glove on was explaining to me that he, at 16, is a field surgeon, more or less, for many of his Primera Linea clan that get injured defending protesters and fighting against ESMAD and various police forces. So the young man lying down with his foot extended has stitches in him that have been infected, and they're trying to remove them and resuture him. And I asked if I could film this, and they were fine with it. I won't show you the video. It's fairly lengthy and somewhat gruesome, but they were very clear that they are just learning how to do this because they cannot go to the hospitals. But also, as I continue to talk with them, when they say we are just learning, it means so much more than we're learning how to be, rudimentary field surgeons. They are just learning politics. They are just learning economics. They are learning movement building and community organizing. And I will say they're quite good at it, and they're very young to be learning this. They feel they have nothing to lose and everything to gain, given the economic situation in Colombia to this day. They do not feel there is access to education, healthcare, any future for them. They're tired of living in a narco state. They do not feel that joining a cartel is an economic future for themselves, nor is it one they want to choose. And so they are building a future for themselves. And as they say, we are just learning. That was a really profound afternoon for me. And I hope that you can appreciate how much these young people want a future for themselves. And I will also add that they're doing this because it hasn't happened by older generations. And I do not include Victor in that older generation because he has been fighting for a free Colombia for a good many years. So let's see, what else do I have here to show you? So this is the medical kit that these young people were using on that particular day. I'm not sure where they obtained this, and they were not willing to share with me how they are supplied with their medical needs. So the last thing I want to share with you that was very profound for me and was really important, and I'm not sure how I didn't quite grasp this before going to Colombia. It really took being there on the ground to see this. When we returned after our 5 days in Pereira, we spent a full afternoon and evening on the streets of Bogota, and we joined this one community. I don't know, they were making like a community dinner for people. And while we were meeting with them, this, I guess what we would call maybe a flash mob in the United States, started marching down the street during commuter hours. And we were not too far from the airport in this particular community. So there was a lot of commuter traffic, and this small crowd started marching down the street right across the lines of traffic in the carretera. They had a very large pancarta, a very large banner. It was 2-3 lanes wide, and they had a megaphone, and they started calling to support the national paro. And they eventually stopped traffic in one lane, and more people started to gather, just as they did at the Plaza Bolivar in Pereira. But what really surprised me and was a wonderful thing to see was all the cars driving by that were beeping, honking, waving in support of this flash protest. These cars were everything I think you can see in the photo here. There's a cement mixer, there's mid-size economy cars. We even saw luxury cars, one white BMW specifically, that actually stopped and clapped and was supporting this little protest. What this showed us was how widespread this paro is. It is not just disaffected youth. It is not just progressive college students. It's not people out of work. It's not, and it is no longer people in the countryside who have been suffering for decades. This paro has moved into the major cities of the country, and it is also seeing participation from middle class people, professionals, doctors, lawyers, academics also support this PARO. It's about 76% of the population. And it was a fantastic thing to see. It was a really, really important thing to see. And it really, really made me understand how widespread the current government is disliked and how many people want a change in Colombia. And so with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Victor, because he is in Bogota, he is Colombian, and I think he's far better at talking to you on a personal level as to what this PARO means to Colombians.
Thank you so much for everyone for being here, and really we really appreciate the solidarity from USA and from everywhere in our context. The Colombian situation is difficult, as Teri told you, but the most important maybe is to give some elements for the general discussion about what is going on. I used to use an example of an onion. You have an onion, the first part of the onion is just the structural explanation of our crisis. Let's say neoliberalism policy, or more exactly, an structural exclusion. When you think about the level of exclusion in Colombia, it's amazing. You know, the gap between the rich people and the poor people, the Gini index. Well, we are in the top 10 of the Gini index during the last decades. In some areas in Colombia, I'm not exaggerating, this is literally, a cow has more land than the farmers. And this is really, really painful. The concentration of land in few hands, the concentration of the wealth of the country in only few families is continuous. The level of poverty is around 42%, according to the official statistics. If you see also, the political exclusion has been an historical issue. We have armed conflict in the last more than half century, and it is based basically on the exclusion for economical and social reasons, but also for political exclusion. For instance, just to give you an example, during the 80s, a former guerrilla group called FARC created a political party in order to start a peace process. But the leader of this party, legally, unarmed civilians were killed. I'm talking about more than 5,000 activists and political citizens were killed in this strategy of the government. It was called the Red Dance because it was the name of the operation conducted by the army in order to destroy, but not to destroy politically, to destroy physically this political organization. But also the killing of candidates of the presidency has been an issue in Colombia. This is not a new issue. The exclusion, politically, economically, and socially, is the first part of the onion. The second part of the onion is the neoliberalism policy, which started in 1990, exactly after the consensus, the Washington consensus. You are familiar with that. All the policy in order to privatize health, education, to privatize many different aspects that affected severely the situation of the poor people in Colombia. You know, what was the reaction in Europe when they tried to privatize, for instance, health sector? Well, in Colombia, they did it. And it's more or less like we have not received anything from the state, and now we will receive less. It's a sarcasm, but this is how the people perceive the state. But also the level of violence is really, really cruel. just to give you some examples, more than 90% of the people, the trade union leaders killed in the world has been in Colombia, especially during the 90s. If you analyze the level of massacres, the level of displaced people, for instance, we have more displaced people, internal displaced people in Colombia rather than in Syria. This gives you an example and an idea how difficult the situation. Well, the other part of the onion is the government of Duque. The President Duque took the power in 2018, and according with his promise, electoral promise, he didn't implement at all the peace process. You know, we have a peace process, a difficult, a long, and important peace process. And finally, despite all these legal issues and this effort that some organization as you help us to get a peace agreement, finally the implementation has been really, really poor. I even dare to say that there is not implementation in an important level. Well, this is due to the policy of the President Duque, but he produced also two reforms, tax reforms, and that's why we, in November 2019, before the pandemic, we had this important national strike against the government. Well, after that, we have the pandemic, and this is the last part of the onion, because in the assistance, in the policy to challenge what was going on because of the pandemic and what is going on still in Colombia, the government preferred to support the banks rather than the people, the companies of health service rather than the hospitals, the open market rather than the protection of society. We propose from the civil society and from leftist organization and democratic sectors to implement some kind of basic salary for everyone, but it was not possible. All the recommendations made in order to guarantee the survival of people during the pandemic was not taken into account by the government. And in this context, we in 2021, this year, in April 28, we decided to go to the street as usual. I took my camera, moved to the Bolivar Square, and honestly, I was thinking that 3 or 4 people will go. You know, it's like this feeling of frustration, and suddenly it's a lot of people. But please, it's not since 2019 so far, it's not that all demonstration with new people. No. It's new demonstration. This is something special. Means the cultural, the dynamic, the feeling, the movement, the kind of activists, the sector of the society involved in the process is totally new. I was really surprised, but my surprise was increasing when we arrived the next day and the people continue in the street. And you know, in Colombia, you have some kind of tradition, a copy from the trade unions organization that you organize a road for the demonstration and like official cartel, official banner with the letters, you know, the official slogan of the demonstration. No, here everyone have a paper and write down whatever they want, whatever they feel, whatever they need, and put on the street. And the young people start to create roads for demonstration in everywhere. And suddenly you see the recyclators, you know, most of them homeless, taking part in the demonstration. And you start to feel how the indigenous movement is moving and creating new demonstrations, blocks in the streets, and the trucks, how you call the truck drivers, that they are, you know, some of them are not so conscious, but this group that I met, totally convinced, and they decide to put the trucks in order to block the roads. And suddenly it's like 1st of May, you know, the day of workers, and we go to the street, and suddenly it's like 1 month. And we talked to Teri, and it was really amazing. And now we are I think that this is the 71st day of the strike, of the national strike. I started to visit places in Bogota, and finally I was in Medellin, in Cali, Pereira, Armenia, Cartago, Facatativá, a lot of small cities and important cities. What I found was, first of all, a community really convinced that the problem is not a tax reform that originally produced these movements. It's against the system. Second one, that they reject in this system all these neoliberal policies, all the privatization. Maybe they are not expert to mention all the paragraphs and the articles and the provisions in the law related to the health or education, but despite of that, they know what is to wait long time for a medical service. They know what is to be excluded from the university. They know what is to be unemployed at home. And it's something relevant for me is in my observation with the people, they are not anymore, say like, for instance, my cousin doesn't want to work. And they start to say, my cousin cannot work because there is not unemployed possibilities. They start to link these daily issues with the political issues. And this is amazing. Maybe I don't know how to transmit how I feel, because for me it was like a revelation. It's not a matter of speeches of the theoretical and academics and intellectuals. It's how the people start to link different political situations in another level. But also we have the neighborhoods we call barrio. But in this barrio, years ago, decades ago, the popular neighborhoods were like the political space, and it died. But now restart again, and you see the people cooking together, and distributing the food and creating a political space of discussion. Then they start talking about different issues that is really important. And who is the political actor of this? Is not the worker that Marx announced, or the farmer announced by Mao, or the indigenous announced by Marcos in Mexico. No. It's it's a different kind of people. It's the indigenous, the Black community. We were with the Black community in Chocó, was amazing, with the indigenous in Cauca, with unemployed youth people. This is amazing. For instance, we were in Medellin, and around 120 people were disappeared or detained. They didn't know exactly where the people was, and they start looking for the people and crossing the list with the list of the students or the activists of the universities. And only 2 of them were part of the Universidad de Antioquia. Most of them were unemployed youth people living in the popular areas. And it's amazing. What Teri says is totally true. For instance, in a city called Facatativá, the police officer started to wait in the door and the gate of the hospital to detain the people wounded during the protest. And the women, all women, organized 7 places, like first aid station, to assist the people. It was amazing. They self, and how the people collect, syringles and antibiotics and analgesics in order to provide these places. In Cali, we were talking to the people, and they say they are not vandals, they are not delinquent, they are our children. And I saw a lady going to the bakery to buy a small bag with bread in order to distribute to the people. Is when you see the old guy bringing coffee for the people in this that start to be called first lines of defense. I like, Teri, what you say. It's not the first line, it's the first line of defense. I really love it, because it expresses exactly what the people start to feel. And suddenly we start to see the first line in Armenia, in Cartago, in Cali, Medellin, Bogota. This is amazing. But not only this organization of youth people really convinced that to die is just an accident, that to die is just a possibility, but to fight is an option. But also what is amazing is to see the mothers of them, mom of first line in Bogota, to see the professor of first line in Medellin, to see the legal jurist or lawyer for first line in Armenia. really involved. I was visiting, Armenia and follow a process for 7 people detained, accused of terrorism, and is the first line in the tribunal who guarantee the freedom of them. But really, or professor giving speeches in the street, this kind of first line of academic first line. And this start to create a new mentality. Some young people say, I didn't know that my neighbor, I saw my neighbor every day, but suddenly I discovered that my neighbor has the same lack of opportunities than me. I realized that in my neighborhood, many people have the refrigerator empty. This is, it's not a political statement analyzing and, no quoting Keynes or quoting Marx. No. This is real life, when you see that, and a lot of people start to go. And for instance, in Cali, there is a small sector called Siloé. People receive, the first line of defense receive a lot of food. A lot means a lot. And they took plastic bags and put back some food to be distributed among the poorest of the poor in the community. When you found this kind of feeling, you discover that, the government should retreat the tax reform, the health reform, 2 ministers resigns, a general resign. This is important, but there is also more important is some kind of conscience, some kind of step so forward from our previous level of political conscience. And this is something amazing. This is okay. This demonstration, this national strike, show the real life of many people, many academics. I was professor several years, but I have really some suspicious with academics. Sorry, to be honest. No offense for the academics here in this room, but it's like blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, what are you doing really? What is the importance of this? A lot of papers, publishing hardware, and what is the real impact? How it touch or not the reality? And for me, it's amazing the new conviction, the new analysis of people, even a sector of the army. People who now are not taking part in the army, they resigned to the army, years ago, but now they have some kind of association of former member of army. They create an association to support the youth people, and they consider themselves like rap, like the music rap, which means reserve active popular, like popular active reserve. And it's really interesting because it's some people who was sergeant, lieutenant, taking part in demonstrations with the young people, and start to create some kind of analysis which oblige to think in another way. First of all, is the trade union leaders the only scenario to fight? No. What is the vanguard? We don't have this vanguard today, and this is amazing, and this is good things for me. What is the actor, the main political actor in Colombia? What is the real cause of our crisis? Is the guerrilla group? No, even not the drug dealers. Of course, we are involved in the drugs issues, but the poverty is before Pablo Escobar. The exclusion is before Pablo Escobar. And suddenly, the New York Times and the Guardian and the El País de Madrid and all the newspapers start to move around what is going on in Colombia. Dozens of people has been killed. Hundreds of people has been wounded. More than 70 of them has lost his eyes because the police has the practice to shoot directly to the face. Thousands of them has been detained illegally. Victim of social violence. A girl, 15 years old, was raped in Medellin. And now it's clear who is who. And in the same way that some academics, intellectuals, and blah, blah, show the real face, the neoliberalism is more and more clear for people. What it means, neoliberalism. Maybe they don't know what was the Chicago Boys. They don't know who was Frederick Hayek or Milton Friedman, but doesn't care. They feel every single day what means neoliberalism. But also the repression of the state. What was shown by Teri is true. It was really important, Teri. Thank you so much on behalf of the Colombian people. But we have a lot of data like that, you know, images, videos, pictures about the level of repression. It's incredible how people has been killed under detention, tortured in the streets, you know, beaten in the most horrible way in front of the cameras. And three actors appeared. Well, they didn't appear, but let's say in this way. First of all, as was mentioned already, the health sector, the popular health sector. I found, you know, nurses and doctors and voluntary in the streets just going together to take care of the wounded people during the demonstrations. It was amazing, but they have been victim of persecution also. In fact, I finished one of my report was to the Inter-American System of Human Rights, based on the collection of the attacks on the health that suffered the health sector mainly by the police during these days. But also appeared another actor, the human rights observer. One day, Cole Harrison, Cole is with us, Cole take a jacket as a human rights worker and go to the street to take care of our rights. And you put Cole Harrison, I put you as an example, in the middle between the demonstrations and the police forces. And another third actor that is really important, independent journalists. And it's really important how the citizen became the journalist. He took the camera, the video, the cell, the mobile, and go to the street to report what is going on. Despite all the silence of the media, or the big media, despite all this complicity of the big journalists, the small ones were in the street reporting daily what was going on. And through Twitter or through Facebook, we could go through all the country and touch the reality. It was really important. And suddenly appear organization or people like you know, people from Argentina, people from USA, and we start to combine between to be in the street, to be writing reports, to taking pictures, but also to take part in this kind of seminar in order to give you to know what is our impression about. I would like to finish say thank you for your solidarity. Really is important. I would like you to insist too much in front of the USA citizen. They have the right to know what is going on, especially in a country who is supported strongly by the policy of USA, what is Colombia. Second one, please talk to your companies. The USA companies has a lot of capacity to push the government in order to respect the human rights and the agreements. And third one, the Congress. All this activism made by some of you about USA send a strong message. Maybe we here, you know, we publish pictures and articles and, conferences and so on, but the impact on the government, this government is really, really, sensitive to what is said or what is done by USA. All these efforts to decrease the economic support for the police forces in Colombia is important. All these messages to guarantee the right to demonstration, the freedom of expression, the respect for human rights in Colombia is really important. Now, the demonstrations are not the same that in the beginning. Now the demonstration has became in another kind of expressions. For instance, assemblies in the street, communal, we call like olla comunitaria, it's like a big pot and communal big pot, let's say, and everyone can go and eat and discuss, or cultural activities or seminars, you know, all these kind of activities. Our big success, we didn't fail. Don't say that, we didn't fail. It's true that we are not still in the street that we were at the beginning, but we didn't fail. 2 reforms, 2 ministers, 1 general. They are out because of the people, especially the young people in the streets. But the most important, our level of conscience about the need of alternative is really huge. What to do with this? I don't have any clue. Honestly, I will not lie. I don't know what will going on tomorrow or after tomorrow in Colombia. But this is one of the most important moments for the social movement, for the political movement. And we have a big hope that for once, at least for once, we really won. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teri, and thank you, Victor. We will open the floor now to questions. Please feel free to send us questions. We will stay for a few more minutes. I know it's already 8 o'clock, but I want to start with asking you, Victor, what do you see is happening in the near future? And are you worried that an attack on Venezuela will come from Colombia?
Well, you know, one of the biggest problems is that the current government, try to focus all the debate to divert the attention to what is going on in Venezuela. And it's silly, because the poverty in Colombia is not related to Venezuela. The killing of people by the police squad to control demonstration is not by order of Maduro. I think that this is part of this narrative that is really important in Latin America about the Castro Chavism. It's like Castro and Chavez are responsible, still, despite all of them are already dead. They are the responsible of what is going on in Colombia. But the paramilitary groups, you know, let me give you an example. In 27 cities in Colombia, 27 cities in Colombia, where civilians with weapons side by side to the police officers using a live ammunition, you know, shooting the demonstrators. This is not a problem of Maduro. Now, part of the activities that we beg you should be done in USA is to distinguish the complexity of Venezuela and the complexity of Colombia. Second one, vindicate the right of self-determination. The problem of Venezuela should be resolved by the Venezuelan people, and the problem of Colombia should be resolved. What could you do to support in our stride to find our correct road? But I think that most of the day by day is more clear that first of all, that there is not problem. It's not because of the Venezuela revolution that Colombia is in a bad situation. A second one, that Colombia will be the strategy of USA in an eventual attack to Venezuela, in the same way like was used the territory of Pakistan to attack Afghanistan 10 years ago.
Thank you. Teri, what's your impression? How do you see the near future from what you saw during your visit? You saw optimism, you saw young activists, but as you said, Victor, there is no vanguard. What does it mean in terms of the continuation and the development of the rebellion?
I wonder if I can backtrack just a minute on your question and make an additional comment regarding Venezuela and
Yes.
Colombia. Because Yoav, as you know, I just returned from 2 weeks in Venezuela, probably my 15th or 20th time there since 2005.
Yes.
And but I also want to I also want to support something that Victor said about, the national sovereignty. Venezuelans need to solve their own problems, and the Colombians need to be allowed to solve their own problems. One of the things that we witnessed in Pereira specifically, but other delegation members heard in other parts of the country as well, and this was consistent when we started talking politics, international relations with people. The Colombian people are very, very clear about the US narrative created against Venezuela. They're very clear about it, and their response is everything the United States says is happening in Venezuela is happening here in Colombia. It's the inverse of the US narrative. And so I just want the audience to know that it's, everything's blamed on Venezuela. It's like, no, it's this. And as for me, my personal experiences, I would say, I was taking copious notes while Victor was talking. There's a few things that regarding neoliberalism, it's really clear there has been not an awakening in Colombia across many, many, many social, economic sectors. I mean, it is, I think, we said earlier in the program, 76% of the population, everything from 15-year-olds, working and battling at a primera linea to 50-year-old middle-class professionals to 80-year-old retired grandparents. It is no longer simply in the countryside of in Colombia. It has moved into the major cities, and that is something really powerful to experience. It's something that I've tried to explain to a lot of my solidarity friends working in Honduras. We wish there could be an awakening in that country as well. And I think, for many people, they're on their way in Honduras, but it's a reality in Colombia. It's a very powerful thing to be among. And another thing that was very fascinating to see, as Victor mentioned, was how many academics and professional people are actually at these Puerto Resistencias, actually working with these primera linea youth. And one of the things I witnessed, and this was in Cali, I went to visit friends after the formal delegation, and we went to the Puerto Resistencia in Cali, and we saw, I guess, political classes, informal classes in the street with constitutional lawyers teaching these young people what their legal and constitutional rights are. So, a real awakening literally from the ground up, from the streets, in community, real educational and movement building. And as I mentioned earlier, what the young people are saying, we are just learning. And they're not talking about just learning how to be, basic physicians. They're learning their political rights and how to mobilize and organize. It's a profound thing to be among, and it's not going to go away. It may, as Victor said, it's going to evolve and change forms, but this political awakening and activism is not going to go away. It's affected, a whole new generation of people.
Victor, do you want to add?
No, I think that the most important to know what is the best way to continue is listen to the young people in the streets and the demonstration places. We try to do our best, my generation tried to do a peace process, try to fight for more justice. We success in some areas, we fail terrible in others, but more than, to analyze who is responsible, I think that we have to pass the responsibility for the young people. They are the vanguard, and we should just form behind them and to follow what they say. This is the most beautiful way to say thank you to these young people.
Okay, there is another
I think that needs to happen all over the world for young people.
Indeed.
I think the young people across the planet need that from us.
right?
Let them lead and we can support them.
There's another question. Do you think the current killing of social leaders in Colombia is a state-endorsed policy?
Well, this is a big discussion about the responsible of the state in this kind of crimes. We have 1,200 social leaders killed in the last years. Some studies, important studies, when you see an academic really involved to study the reality, show clearly the geography of this killing. And it's the same like the geography of the paramilitary groups. It's the same like the region of Colombia when people are asking the return of the land of the displaced people. It's the same that you have conflicts for land property. I mean, it's a clear pattern that you can identify. The people that has been killed, some of them are a leader of the trade unions, leader of the indigenous communities, leader of these IDPs, the internal displaced persons who are fighting for access to the land, but also people who reflect a new view to develop political issues in the regions. When they are killing social leaders, they are not also killing the social expression, but also the political expression. This is also a concrete example of this exclusion, political exclusion in Colombia. Then the state has a responsibility. As you may remember, when you study law, constitutional law, the state has the responsibility not only for what the state does, but also what the state omit to be done. When the state don't do something, has also a responsibility. I used to say like this omission, this responsibility for omission is a systematic issue in the Colombian case. Then it's a clear responsibility of the state. Also, we should add that some of this crime has been committed by the army. And this is proven. It's not a slogan by myself. It's proven. Or groups with the complicity of the army, of the police officers. Meaning, if you put it together, the conclusion, the obvious conclusion is that the state has a great responsibility for, let their own armed forces to commit these crimes, but also not to investigate properly, not to prosecute the criminals in Colombia.
I want to ask you one more question here. How do you, since about half of the population in Colombia live in poverty, how is it that politicians like right-wing politicians like Uribe and Duque are elected in the first place? How is it?
One of the big problems of the poverty, I'm talking by my own experience. I grew up in a small neighborhood in Bogota called Palestina, like Palestine. Yeah, indeed, in the south of Bogota, really poor neighborhood. And for me, one of the biggest success, between brackets, of the capitalism is the creation of poor people with a high level of resignation. They don't want to fight anymore. This is maybe one of the best products of capitalism. You are poor, you have to die being poor. You can dream only about go to the poor places and to get job for poor people and not to study and dream with salary for poor people and everything related to your class condition. This is one of the most biggest dangerous and pervert product of the capitalism. And in this way, some people are accepted like that. And they vote for the right parties, they support the right parties. But also one, not new, but let's say more or less new situation in Colombia is the appearance of this kind of new Catholic church. And all these Catholic churches play a really important political role when you need to talk, when you want to talk about the change or justice or democracy They present us as we support abortion. We don't condemn homosexuals, and we are linked to Venezuela and Cuba. We would like to destroy the traditional family. Come on, in Colombia, traditional family is a single mother fighting for the food of 3 or 4 children. This is like traditional family in our country. And you know, it's all this kind of issue that really, plus the media, which are all the time try to convince that we don't have a crisis because of the national strike. They say, no, we have a crisis because of the national strike. The national strike is not the consequences of the crisis, it's the cause of the crisis. And you know, all this representation is amazing. That's why we have to be so creative. And let me say something against the leftist movement, and is we repeat a slogan, narrative, speech, words, approach that we are in the 70s, means 50 years ago. No, we are in this century, and we have the duty to be creative. The imagination should be in the first line of defense, as Teri said before.
Well, yes, Teri, you wanted to say something, but Victor, I appreciate this.
Yeah, so much of what he says is just recalling memories from, you know, from being there in May and early June. About the women, the single mothers with children. This was the demographic that we consistently heard on all 5 teams throughout the country, that that single women, single mothers with children, single women with children is the most affected demographic in the country. And that was pretty riveting. And in talking with many women, I remember one conversation specifically. I was not allowed to record it. I was just allowed to take notes, no photos or audio or anything, because she has a 15-year-old son who is a primera línea, a youth. And, you know, she said that she supports him and what he's doing because he's fighting for his own future, and how can she negate his choice to do that? Now, every day when he leaves the house, she's terrified, she's horrified that, you know, he won't come back, or if he comes back, he's going to be, you know, in very serious physical shape. But it was really, you know, to hear, you know, a woman talk that way about, you know, a 15-year-old who's basically, you know, a young man at 15, which quite young, not so young in other countries, in many countries, but, you know, to say, this is what he's chose. He's fighting for his future, and there's no way I can tell him that's wrong or not to do it. Yes. And so she supports him, as do many of the adults, as Victor was saying. I mean, this is, you know, the energy is behind them, and to support them to building the country that's needed.
Yeah, I think that we deserve to write down an encyclopedia, you know, about this experience. Really wonderful. I follow as a journalist the demonstrations in Egypt, Tunisia, you know, all the Lebanon, Jordan. But when you have this in your own home, it's something really special. I saw two comments in the chat that I would like to mention, if you don't mind, huh? May I?
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, there is no generation struggle. Some people try to say, like, well, the old people and the young people. No, I think that we really, as Teri suggests, we really broke this tension between generations. And it's amazing how father and mother support the young people with a lot of respect. And the second aspect, someone mentioned Garcia Marquez already. And I remember the best book of history about Colombia is 100 Years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez. And in one of its part, he said, you know, there is a massacre. And one of the characters came to say to the lieutenant in the police station, hey, there is a massacre. And he said, don't worry, this, there is not, has not happening anything, is not happening, and will not happen anything in this country. This is a happy country. This kind of narrative is exactly what is going on in Colombia. When they try to say like the problem is Venezuela, or the problem is the drug dealer, or the problem is the national strike. No, we start to see our own problem. And the most important, the role of you, and sorry to say, my personal role as a journalist is to be a mirror. You know, it's a mirror to facilitate people to see themselves, to connect with their own reality. And once it happened, the rest, I hope, will be easier.
Well, on this optimistic note, we will end. Victor and Teri, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and so that we can follow what is happening in Colombia and understand it better. And thank you everybody for participating. Brian, you want to add something?
Just my thanks. Just my thanks to Victor and Teri for your powerful presentations. I hope they spur everyone who's listening on to take action and to really give power to our voices. I think that's what you've done tonight, and I just want to say I really appreciate it. And everyone, watch out. We will be emailing you a link to this recording. These voices need to be heard, so please share the link to that recording to as many of your friends and family as possible. I invite you all to join as members of Massachusetts Peace Action and to get involved directly, because we can make these changes. We can truly stand in solidarity with the people of Colombia, but our government is a big part of the problem, and we need to be saying something about that. So I invite you all to join us, to join our Latin America and Caribbean Working Group, and we will be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you for the invitation. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.